I worked for Walmart for about 10 years. I headed up research and analytics. My team was basically responsible for all the various departments of Walmart and 7 strategic business units. So we basically supported Walmart with all the information needs, all the analytics and insights and customer understanding. So there's a multitude of various types of information we needed.
Right, exactly. Not only was it across the entire business for all kinds of different needs and questions, but it's for one of the largest retailers in the world, at Walmart. So I imagine you and your team must have been dealing with a ton of data on a weekly basis, right?
It was a ton of data, and it was a million different sources, a million different methodologies, and also competing sources, which made it difficult. So that was probably broadly, we took that and converted it into essentially a story for the key people we were supporting.
Can you tell me a little bit more about how you did that? Sometimes the data can be conflicting, they're from different sources, different methodologies. So, how did you guys deal with that?
I mean, a lot of it was just sheer manpower, just put more people against it. In many cases, we had an insights or a group against each of the different business units, and they were sort of their own little team that had their own sources of information. We shared information across as much as we could, but each one developed their sources that were best for each of the business units. Obviously, we try to create one holistic approach to collecting all the information, which is next to impossible because information around food and grocery was generally a different source of information than, say, online information or versus general merchandising information or healthcare information. So we had to really grab it from all sources. So that meant buying it from different providers of information. And also, we collected a lot of our own internally. So we essentially had just an ocean of information, and you went out and took from that what you needed for your particular business unit.
From that ocean of information, did you think that that was in general helpful? Or is there a point where it becomes too much information?
It was too much information. In the end, you're not looking for all the information. You're looking for information that is important to whatever topic or whatever issue or whatever business challenge you have. What are the key metrics? What was the insight? What the executives just wanted was one version of the truth that we all sort of agreed to. So we could rather say a cohesive story and here's how we track it and here's what we should do about it. So it's great to have the ocean information if you can pare it down to what you need. So that was probably our biggest challenge. I do find in the different organizations I've worked with, it's not so much a lack of information, it's a lot of times what information do I need? What is relevant to me? What is the insights and key measurements coming out of that? In the end, helps you build your business. You don't want to be swimming around and discussing all the various the ocean of information. You want to get to solving the business.
Sometimes it leads you down the wrong path as
Right.
well,
Oh,
right? And
absolutely.
different people have different opinions. And when you have conflicting information, this one team can pick up on this particular source, but then that team relies on that particular source. Well, who's right?
Go online and find information on anything and prove your point about anything. What is sort of missing is universal objective truth that you can base your strategies on and your insights on and eventually measure how successful you are. If you have a big ocean of information and anyone can go anywhere, it usually doesn't lead to great business decisions. So my job was basically with fusions, was instrumental to take all our information and make it a cohesive whole, one picture. This is why it's important. This is why we should look at it. And that's what everybody should be looking at as a success. I think the whole idea of fusing it all together and understanding how it all interacts and how it all works and looking at specifically what is important just really sort of struck a chord. Or I mean, it was almost next to impossible to disagree with something like that. It just makes absolute sense.
It makes sense when you're talking about it that way to bring everything together. But in reality, it can get a lot, that process in and of itself can get quite complicated, right? Because every single source has its own nuances, their specific way of doing calculations. this includes e-commerce, that doesn't include brick, right? Like this is a POS survey, that source is from a survey or from receipt capture.
Right.
So did you think it was helpful? Was that part of what Fusion kind of brought to the table as well in just the execution of that and being able to understand the different sources and then actually bring it together?
My team were insights people and analytics people should be focused on the business and understanding the business and applying the insights and stuff to the business, really understanding. And us as a team, we can't compete with maybe 30 or 40 people at Fusion who are all kinds of backgrounds focused on the retail market to understand it, to paint those pictures, to fuse all the information together. So, just by virtue of having experience with hundreds of other retailers using all kinds of bits of information, their own information, including ours, it wasn't something we really could do or we should do. And certainly Fusion was much better equipped because that was their focus.
Fusion's been in the retail business for a really long time. So it really has its bones understanding the retail landscape, understanding the consumers. Right. Was that helpful at all in helping Walmart get to where it wanted to be?
Oh, absolutely. I think the fact that Fusion has been focused on the retail business and taking all the information around the retail business and fusing it together for many clients, but also as a whole market. It is just something that I don't care how big an insights team is or an analytical team is, it's just not something they can do. So the fact that essentially Fusion has been a university on retail for 20 years or however they've been long is just not something you can compete with. That's all Fusion's been studying is the retail market, creating models and algorithms and fusing all information together to just understand more. I think it's invaluable because even if my team, when it was with Walmart, we only have a limited amount of information. It's a lot of information, but it's still limited compared to what Fusion has because they make use of all information and are trying to ongoingly create the picture of the retail market. That to me is not something that tends to happen even in corporations who have the biggest budgets.
So, in your role, I'm sure you've been dealing with lots of vendors, lots of different kinds of vendors, different data sources, and lots of different companies. So, yeah. What do you think was unique about Fusion and their solution that they bring to the table?
Well, I think in the end, it's in the name. You fuse information from all vendors together to paint the overall picture. So there's great people doing great research and vendors, coming in with great information, but certainly they don't consider all the information. So what I always liked about Fusion is they're always welcoming to new information coming in. It just adds to the understanding of what we were looking at anyway. So the fact that they're able to fuse everything, connect it, and some new information comes in, it just fits within what we already know. Fusion information provides it. But the way Fusion looks at it is just here's all the information and here's how this new insights, this new way of tracking, or this new bit of data, this is how it fits and that's what it's telling you. And it's not contradictory, and it's a lot of times this is how it relates with all the other aspects, and this is why it's important or not important. So I find the key difference with Fusion is they consider all the information and not just one source and look at it very objectively.
How do you think this collaboration then has helped you and your team?
Fusion helped fusing all the information together and helping the insights and analytic team to understand the business and apply things to the business and develop strategies rather than swimming through all the data. It's just a clarity and understanding how everything fits together, what's important and what isn't important, and what are the metrics we should look at. I think what that provides the team is the ability to really look into the business more and understand the business more, which in turn makes the demand on the information more. So it's just really a win-win. I think I said earlier, a sea of data, it's hard to do anything with it. It's a lot of work. if you may go and pick out a piece of insight or an understanding that may be contradicted by something else. In the fusion world, I think the ocean's extremely organized and you understand all the different points and what affects what has historically fit what, and all new information fits in sort of in a structured way to give you a deeper understanding as opposed to just another bucket of data and insights. A big thing Fusion helps us with, or helped us with, was really the efficiency and the time. So you're able to get rid of information you don't need or put it in its rightful sort of place and hierarchy, but you're also able to get to that much quicker. So you don't have to sit around and wait for somebody to go through the ocean of information to find what the answer is. You have the answer very quickly.
Can you give me an example of that?
Something very simple is, or not simple, but is the impact of your advertising, the impact of your flyer, the impact of opening a store, the impact of terrible weather over a couple of months.
These are questions executives are asking all the time.
They're the most important questions. That's why they're asking them. So before, it was a project to find that out. After we worked with Fusion, it was just simply something that was identified as important and continuously monitored and looked at regularly. So it comes back to this identifying what's important and what isn't. So obviously, it's very important to see how your advertising is doing and what impact it has or weather had, especially if you're doing forecasts. Well, we did horribly this year. What were the things that drove maybe sales down or drove sales up? Getting to the understanding of that objectively was just phenomenal.
What was it like before? So let's take that campaign example.
Right.
We spent a lot of money on a campaign. Everybody wants to know if it worked or not. What was the impact? To get the answer to that question before, what did that involve? How many reports you'd have to look at, or how would your team even approach that question to get the answer?
We would track it. We would have an organization or an agency who would track the awareness, track unaided awareness, track all the typical things you do when you track it, an ad campaign. And we would look at sales and see, would sales go up and down. So we had a really good story of what the effect was, but never 100% confident. So it may just have been that the weather was much better. It may have just been that interest rates have been dropping or unemployment had gone down or up or whatever. So it was really before we had an understanding, but we didn't know grounded solidly that this advertising did exactly this. The other things that drove it were, the weather, the employment situation, other stores opening up, whatever the other were. So it really kind of gave us a really good grounding and understanding of whether it was successful or not. Obviously, if you're vested in the advertising, you want to prove that it's good. It wasn't always. And so it's just what it gave us was a consistent way of measuring whether it had an impact or not.
So it was like every time a campaign happened, there's these tea leaves that essentially that everyone is looking at. But person A is always looking at these things, the things that went up and say, oh, it worked.
Yeah.
But for the next campaign, those same metrics could be down. And it just wouldn't, like there was no overarching thesis that connected the two on what actually drove campaign performance. Right. And so there was that idea of confusion on, well, are we just seeing what we want to see?
Right.
Or is this objectively true?
Yeah, again, it's going back to the ocean of data. If I want to prove something went well, I can go and find that somewhere. Mm-hmm. I think what Fusion brought was just a very objective way of looking at the success of anything that we did and be able to fully understand that objectively. Was it successful or not? How was successful? What was the return on investment for that? And understanding that just simply made us better, made us, understand how we could improve. Even driving down to why it didn't succeed or why it succeeded was incredibly important, and how we did versus, the market. So
Mhm.
just understanding the whole market and really eliminating sort of the red herrings or false information and being able to be very consistent because in the end business is about what was my return on investment.
What do you think was the impact across the entire organization from looking at things this way?
Well, I think the impact of looking at it the way Fusion looks at it and being able was to be able to get us to a point of view where you just have consistency and understanding over a long period of time and just a consistency of building more and more insightful insights and not having to reinvent them. I think it gave us a systematic approach. It gave us really an ongoing and consistent way of understanding what priorities are and how important various commercial endeavors within the business were. I think it eliminated a lot of work, unnecessary work, by understanding what you don't need to look at and its
Mhm.
importance and understanding where you should really put your research money or commercial activities. So I really think overall it just gave us a more systematic, objective way and also a way of absorbing new information into what our current understanding and a lot of times how important that is, what new layers
Mhm.
it provided. So I think it would be consistency, efficiency were probably the biggest
Mhm.
two things for the organization as a whole.